the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Welcome to the Happy Families podcast. My name is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the co-host and parenting expert on Channel 9's hit TV show Parental Guidance and the author of a bunch of books about how to make your family happier. Every Tuesday on the podcast, I answer your questions about making your family happier, getting things working the way they need to. To submit a question, please go to happyfamilies.com.au, click on the podcast link, and then push the record button. That's all you got to do. Super simple. Here's our first question from Kirsty.
Hi, Justin and Kylie. I'm the mum of an almost 5-year-old boy who's in 4-year-old kinder. I'd really love some advice on separation anxiety with drop-offs. I've tried different approaches and nothing seems to make a difference. He's fine about 5 minutes after I leave, but it's the initial leaving that makes him really upset and he's crying for mum. And I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop it. Please help.
One of the most heartbreaking aspects of parenting. I absolutely hate this. Been through it with all of our kids in different ways at different times. Kids want their parents with them. That's really what's going on here. It's biologically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, at every level. It's normal for kids to want their parents to be there. We are their secure base. We're what makes them feel safe. And as they move into a novel environment, even if they've been there many, many times, there's still that natural, biological, visceral desire to be close to mum or dad, especially when they're just little. Totally normal, developmentally appropriate. What we're really asking them to do when we drop them off at school, especially at the age of 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6, we're asking them to do something that is not part of the natural order of things, which means in some ways it's kind of hard to come up with some useful answers. Why? Well, we're asking them to go against their natural biological and psychological urges. In spite of that, there are a handful of things, Kirsty, that I think can be helpful and can move us in the right direction. So let's see how we go. Number one of our basic psychological needs is the need for relatedness, strong relationships, a feeling of connection. Connection's feeling seen, heard, and valued, a feeling of belonging, like I matter. And when I think about this relatedness need in relation to your context, you're always going to be the top of the heap. Okay, the hierarchy has mum, followed by dad, usually followed by grandma. That's the hierarchy, and there literally is a hierarchy. Kids have got strong preferences in terms of who they're going to be related to or want to connect with. But if we work well with the school on this, we can also create really strong relationships at school. So there might be a strong relationship with a friend. Friends are oxygen to our children. They just inhale their friends and say, oh yeah, this feels good, especially as they get older. But it starts from around about that age of 5 or 6 and builds from there. Maybe a teacher. Maybe their classroom teacher is the person that they can really connect with and bond with. Maybe they've got a really compassionate, loving teacher who's there with open arms saying, I'm so glad you're here today. Let's have some fun. It could be that there's an animal in the classroom that the child feels like they bond with. I know a lot of schools have therapy dogs. Some classrooms have frogs or fish or lizards or other animals that the kids can really be excited about. And while that's not going to be the same level of relationship, there's that thing that gets them there because they get to have some kind of a connection. Second idea ties into the second basic psychological need that I talk about all the time, and that's the need for competence, a need for a sense of mastery, like I can get this. See, when a child's not doing well emotionally, when they get dropped off at school, they already feel a little bit incompetent. By helping them to feel competent at school, they're much more likely to be motivated to be there. So if school is a safe place, we've got that ticked, relationships sorted, and that's so important. The second thing is there a job that I can do when I get to school? Is there somebody that I can help? Is there some reading that I can do? Is there some classroom setup or craft organization or something that I can do that is supportive? Maybe I can play with somebody who needs a playmate. These kinds of things, having a job to do, an autonomously chosen job, a job where there's been some interaction with the teacher and this feels good to me to do it and that's why I'm going to opt in. That's a second thing that can be a really strong way to reduce the anxiety around departure of parents from the school drop-off. But let's go back a step or two, back into the house for a sec. I think there's value in just pausing and considering what your mornings feel like. If your morning is a tornado, that is not going to lead to a nice, calm start for the drive and for the drop-off. That chaos, that craziness, that carnage at home can really contribute to anything but a calm transition into the school. So I'd be wanting to make sure that the setting at home feels good, it feels comfortable, it feels safe, and we've got a child who feels good as they're getting up, but they're still on purpose. They're on track. They're moving towards a reasonable entry into the school day. The next thing I'd say about being at home is if you've got a child who is struggling, giving them the cold shoulder, giving them short shrift, just saying, hey, you know what, kiddo, suck it up, drink some concrete, harden up, build a bridge, get over it, toughen up, princess. That approach does not build resilience. It makes kids feel more incompetent, and the connection that they have with you now gets battered as well. It just ruptures. So this is not a helpful approach. Instead, I would say empathy. Now, please note, I said empathy, not apathy, and not therapy. Empathy is what kids are going to do best with when it comes to parents who are saying goodbye under challenging circumstances. Empathy looks like this. I know it's hard. I get it. It's really hard. Give us a hug. All right. We're going to be brave. Let's go and get in there because this is what we need to do. Empathy is saying what you can see, validating the emotion, and then moving towards positive action, adaptive, healthy action that gets a strong outcome. Now, quick pause on this one as well. If you're dealing with a child who is not just sort of struggling a bit, as you are, Kirsty, but then after 5 minutes or so, your child is fine. If you're dealing with a child who is needing to be restrained, if you're dealing with a child that you're literally dragging out the door, in other words, a child who has emotion-based school avoidance, a child who is absolutely doing everything they can to not be at school, these ideas are still going to be helpful, but we're going to have to be a bit more sensitive and probably work a lot more closely with the school or even with a therapist. I'd love to talk more about this idea of emotion-based school avoidance, but we just don't have enough research for me to give you really strong guidance on that right now. So we're going to stay with this situation where we've got a kid who's happy enough to be there once they're there, but the first 5 minutes and the actual separation are tough. So we've got empathy, not apathy, and not therapy. Saying what we see and then moving towards adaptive outcomes. And the last thing that I'll say that can really help to minimize, reduce anxiety in a child and support them as they make that transition into the school context is for them to either A, get there with enough time to settle in. I mean, if you're dropping them off and it's rushed and they're racing into school and everything's happened in an absolute fluster, that's not going to feel good. But secondly, if they can have a chat with the teacher and get an idea of the roadmap for the day. Kids are literally flying blind, and some of them want a sense of certainty. They want some form of cognitive closure. What am I doing today? How can I feel safe and secure? Where are we headed? If I've got a sense of direction, I'm going to feel so much better about being at school. Ultimately, we're talking about nurture at home and at school. We're also talking about flexibility at home and at school. And I've really got to emphasize a strong relationship, a really beautiful alliance in terms of communication between home and school. Kirsty, hope that makes a difference and helps your little guy to settle into school that little bit more comfortably. Question number 2.
Hi, Justin. Hi, Kylie. My name's Michala, and I'm mum of 3 young kids, twin boys, 8 years old, and a little girl who is 6 years old. What I'm wondering is, can you change sibling dynamics? Our little guys have 3 very different personalities. The boys are best friends. One is very rule-abiding. The other one loves to push boundaries. And my daughter is quite independent and strong, but also quite sensitive. The outgoing boy will default to picking on her if he's tired or hungry, which is basically all school term. He can pick on her. That's too much, honey. Or she can give him a side look and he reacts hugely, either verbally or sometimes physically. I've tried a lot of different avenues, but my main concern is it will affect my daughter's overall confidence as she is continually picked on. I hope you can help shed some light. Thank you.
Okay, Michala, 2 boys, twins, age 8, a 6-year-old girl, and can you change sibling dynamics? Well, the short answer is yes, you can do something about sibling dynamics. In terms of personalities, maybe not so much. Siblings are funny, right? Like, if you don't want to have sibling rivalry, there's only one solution. That's to not have siblings. Clearly, with 3 kids, it's too late for you to get away with that one. And it's so curious as well, because parents will always say, oh, they're so different. And yet when we look at who we are compared to our own siblings, we're usually so different. So it's also a reality that there's going to be conflict and strife in every relationship. You're just not going to stamp it out. Kylie and I have what I would consider to be an absolutely first-class marriage. We are just crazy about each other. We are two people who have literally chosen one another to live with, to be together, to do life together, and we still have conflict. And so I think the central thing that I want to emphasize here is you're probably not going to change the personalities. You may be able to shift the dynamics, but that comes through character education. It comes through a process of helping your children to know who they are and to tap into what they value. And this is the sort of process that does not happen as quickly as teaching a kid how to tie up their shoelaces. That takes long enough as it is, or write their name. We're talking about something that takes a lot longer. One of my great regrets, one of my absolutely most painful regrets of my upbringing is how awfully I treated my younger siblings, specifically my sisters. They're 4 years younger than me. They're twins. And I was absolutely awful to them. There's nothing redemptive about the way that I treated them. I picked on them, called them names. I used to hit them like that. That was just what I did. And mum and dad were desperate to get me to stop. And at some level, I knew that it wasn't helpful. And yet I had to really grow up before I sort of grew out of it. It was just awful. There was no kindness. There was no consideration. And what's really curious to me is I don't know if there are any residual effects in terms of they've grown up to live lives that I don't know that the impact of my horrible big brother behavior toward them has had any effect on who they've become as people. I don't know that. But what I do know is that we don't have the closeness that I wish we had. And it's a source of ongoing, probably lifelong pain for me. You're with your siblings longer than anyone else. Like your parents die, maybe 20 or 30 years before the end of your life. You don't meet your husband or wife or partner until you're 20 or 30 years into your life. But your siblings, they come along when you're little and they usually live for about as long as you. You've got them for life. And not that this is all about me. I've made this into a personal therapy session. I'm so sorry. But one of my great regrets is the residual effect, I think, of my awful behavior towards my sisters specifically is that we don't have tremendous closeness even as adults, even though I've apologized and tried to make things right and so on. Anyway, enough about me. Let's get back to you. But ultimately, what I think we need to do is have a couple of conversations ongoingly with the boys. Conversation number one, a real man helps the people around him feel safer and stronger. If you are engaging in behavior towards your little sister that does not leave her feeling safer and stronger, then that is not manly behavior. That is not powerful behavior. That is not strong. That is weak. If you, as a boy who is 3 years older than your little sister, feel a need to belittle her and to denigrate her, to pick on her and to make her feel less than so that you can feel strong and powerful, you're doing it wrong. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're not making her feel safer and stronger. So to me, that is probably our first conversation: kindness, consideration, safer and stronger. The second conversation is that all relationships are tricky. Even when you live 1,000 kilometers away from your siblings, sometimes it's still tricky. And regardless of the context of the relationship, you're going to fall into mistakes consistently. Therefore, if there is a rupture, we need to know how to repair effectively, how to repair with empathy, how to repair with kindness, how to repair in a way that shows that we are all human and we don't mean to make mistakes. And when we do, we're willing to own those mistakes, be responsible for them, and work again towards helping those around us feel safer and stronger. Now, to me, if you can work on those two conversations with your boys, you're going to go a really long way to raising really, really great men of character, men who get it. Now, they're not going to get it straight away. They're 8. You're going to have this conversation a lot of times, or these conversations many, many, many times. They don't care about what it's going to be like when they're older. They don't get what it's going to be like when they're older, which means this conversation has to kind of be on repeat. This is exhausting for parents, but I don't know any other methodology that's going to get you there. It's just not fully going to go away for a long time. But this messaging around being stronger and safe when I'm in your presence, that's it. And conversations like, well, how did you feel when you said that to her? How did she feel when you said that to her? How did our family feel? We're teaching empathy here. We're teaching character. We're teaching consideration of others. Anyway, Michala, I hope that's helpful. Fingers crossed it makes your family happier and the conversations go in a productive direction. Thanks so much for your questions. If you would like to submit a question to the Happy Families podcast, I answer them every Tuesday. Just go to happyfamilies.com.au, click on the podcast link and press the record button. Leave us a voice memo. Voice memos get answered way faster and we love to hear from you. happyfamilies.com.au, click on the link for podcasts and then push the button to record the voice memo. Let me know what's on your mind. I'm glad to help to make your family happier. Thank you so much for listening. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And if you'd like more information about making your family happier, check out our range of books at happyfamilies.com.au.